All right, so this is going to be the second episode of the Furry Art Podcast. I'm joined today with my guest Willow, also known as Glopossum. Thanks for coming on,
Hi.
Willow.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I stumbled across I'd seen your art around for a few years, and
Hmm.
just the other day I stumbled across the comics, and I just read both of them back to back,
Oh my
crossing
gosh.
that bridge. Yeah, and I was just after reading it, I was like, oh yeah, definitely got to interview this artist.
Wow, what a thrill. I mean, this is cool for me just because I've been following your art for a little while now, and it taps into a lot of just things I love to see in art, like just I don't know, awesome painting. I'm a bit of a Grecophile, and you gave Lysippus a persona, so I'm just like loving it. And um, to hear that you found my work and you enjoyed it is just the one a great little feeling for me. So it's awesome to be here, and
Oh.
I'm riding high right now.
Well, thank you, and yeah, it's great to have you on. So, tell the audience a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've been a furry artist for at least like 15 years, doing commission work for probably like 12, 13, and then doing freelance, like self-employment, full-time furry for coming up on 6 years. Actually, it's almost 6 years to the day at this point, which is cool to think about. Um, and I mostly work in comics, like long form comics, and with an occasional little illustration or two sprinkled in between. Um, and most of what I do is on like Patreon, but I also just upload stuff to for Affinity and Twitter and all that.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll definitely have links to all your stuff in the description. And wow, 13 years you've been doing commissions?
I've somewhere around there, yeah. I mean, probably earlier. I can't say they were good, but yeah,
Yeah,
no,
wow.
I've, I mean, my first for Affinity account was like made in 2005. So
Oh
I'm
my
a
goodness,
long
that's
time furry.
just when the website came out. Oh my goodness.
I guess so.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool though. I mean, your work has this certain look to it, especially when it comes to character art, that it feels like it's the work that you it's like a certain confidence to it that comes from people that have just been drawing for years and years and years. So that definitely.
That is no, that's just a relief to hear because I can't step outside of my own art and look at it. So I'm glad
No,
it looks
absolutely.
pretty
It
good.
yeah, it just has that look. You can tell right away this person has done thousands of figures and really has it dialed in.
Yeah, I try to keep up.
Yeah. And my goodness, just the one thing that I found interesting was just the scale of these comics. So the first one is how many pages? It's like 50
50.
something. 50. Oh
Yeah.
my
Uh,
goodness.
that was a stroke of luck too because I have a bad habit of not planning my comics completely all the way out before I start them, and having it end on a nice round even number was like such a delight for me. But yeah, wow, that was my first comic, wasn't it? And I went for it.
Wow. First comic 50 page, did you have any idea that you were going to go for such an ambitious project, or was it initially going to be something smaller, or did it just kind of happen?
Not at all, because like my points of comparison or inspiration for like what a furry comic should be or how it should be structured is like people like AC or Mish who usually, max out, or at the time we're maxing out at like 30 pages, and we're able to sufficiently tell their story and also get to the juicy parts of the comic. And I'm like, cool, yeah, that should be achievable, right? Um, and then I fell into the trappings of characterization.
Yeah, there's a fair
And
bit of just character build up, and then just so many expressions kind of as it slowly develops, and there's just a mix of emotions and it's going all over the place. I love it.
Yeah.
I love comics where it just has that setup, so you get really invested in the characters before it gets to the
Yeah.
action.
I'm glad people can, because yeah, I don't know. I never considered myself much of a writer, and I didn't know exactly where my strong suits were before starting. So it's cool. It has been cool to hear like what I am good at, and then just trying to lean into that a bit more as I work on it even more.
Yeah. Did you? So for the second comic, I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
not done yet. It's in the almost 70 pages at this point, I believe.
We're on page 69.
69. So for that one, did your process change at all? Did you plan ahead the whole thing, or is it also just like
I
was
mean,
there any?
it's basically the same process, just refined a little bit with like the things I learned from mistakes or things I was annoyed with the first comic and that process. Because if I may talk about just like what the process was for each one,
Yeah, absolutely.
because with the first comic it started with a pinup, um an old one of Junip like sitting at a vanity, putting on makeup, cross-dressing, and getting caught and trying and it.
Yeah, I saw that one.
Yeah, yeah. It I have a little bit of an overactive imagination, and I kept trying to think of like what the context for that was, because for a lot of my pinups at the time, I was writing like really, juicy descriptions to go along with posting them so that I could provide some more context and hopefully get other people's imaginations going. And that one, that idea just kind of kept spinning until I
Oh,
kind of
so,
started to come up with like, oh, go ahead.
oh, I was just like that's so cool that like this whole epic 50-page comic just came together through like a single image, planting the seed and then just developing and coming up with context and just having it be a whole story afterwards. That's so cool.
Right, yeah, and that's only half of it, because the other half was like what was going on in my life at the time, which was figuring out uh, that I'm trans and coming to terms with it, and also early steps in transitioning. And so when those two kind of collided, it basically became like, okay, so I have this framework for like a porn comic, and now I have this like sort of autobiographical aspect that I want to inject into it. And basically just started with like, okay, I have like the comparison I make is like animation keyframes, where I have like set moments, and then so for the instance, the illustration and also this like point of in the comic, I guess I'll spoil it, um but at the end, the dog character Elise realizes she's trans, and so I'm like, okay, how do we get from A to B, and then just filling in more and more and more in between, and then I get 50 pages of a comic out of
Oh,
nowhere.
okay. So it was not like you started with no like set end point in mind. You knew what you're going for, and it was just the process of going from A to B that ended up having the comic be quite a bit longer.
Yeah, like there was a general idea of like, okay, I want cross-dressing as the central theme in terms of like the pornography part of it, and then the story beats of like the self-actualization through sex and kink. And um that came into, or that produced like an outline that was very rough, and then I started to sort of fill in the gaps and fill in the gaps more and more and more and more, until I got to a point where I'm like, okay, I think I'm comfortable starting this. Well, rather, okay, that's a whole different story how I started it. But I was basically told by someone that if I am thinking about starting a comic and I keep hesitating, that I should just do it. and
Yeah.
that worked. So thank you, to
Yeah,
the person
sometimes
who
you gotta
told me
just
that.
jump right in.
Yeah, definitely. I'm so glad I did. Because I figured a lot out very quickly in terms of like, okay, what is my process actually? And it turns out it's like, yeah, I take that outline and then I distill it even further down into like what happens on a given page. And then for that page, I start to mentally block out what it looks like, and then I write it and thumbnail it and then draw it. So,
Okay.
and that's basically the structure that I took with me to a show of the ropes was like great big outline, start to kind of flesh it out, and then um, once it gets more and more detailed, then I start to take that over into like basically a separate Word document and break it down into pages and write out the pages like probably like five at a time, just so I don't get too ahead of myself or locked in to a certain amount of pages or what happens on a page. Um, yeah.
Okay. So would it be like
Hmm.
when it comes to finished pages, do you have like do you finish them one at a time and then like have a couple roughed out ahead of that and then a couple more kind of scripted, or what's the sort of organized like
Uh, yeah, like in terms of like, okay, I have it organized now. How do I actually produce it?
yeah.
Um, it basically, for the most part, is one page at a time, which it probably could be a lot different because I mean, I have comics friends who like, oh, I've done this whole 10 page comic in one sitting, which is that blew my mind when I heard that they were
What?
doing that because I'm just like, wow, I can't even fathom doing something even slightly different from this process that I cooked up based off my own intuition.
Yeah, no, that sounds like it would be completely overwhelming doing 10 pages at once like that.
Well, and then I tried to implement that like to a degree to my current process where I'm like, okay, could I do two, maybe 3 pages at a time? And ouch, I think that was too much for me.
Yeah.
Uh, but
So I
yeah,
know.
basically, oh, go
Sorry.
ahead. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say. I noticed that like so for the first one it was all black and white, and then for
Mm-hmm.
the second one you're doing full color. So is that like does that dramatically increase the amount of time per page, or is it? I was just wondering because like that's kind of a choice that uh, I always wonder about when artists do comics. Like a lot of them do black and white, a lot of them do full color, and I'm just wondering, was there
Mm-hmm.
a reason why you decided to go full color on the second one?
The grayscale for crossing that bridge was basically giving myself like a crutch for my first big comic where I'm like, okay, like I am diving into this. The least I can do for myself is to simplify the process one little like, smidge and just not do full color. Um Turns out not that much more work to just do flat colors like I have been doing with the show of the ropes. Because like the stuff that I shaded in crossing that bridge, like the boots and the dick, like stuff I want to put emphasis on is basically like exactly what I'm doing with the show of the ropes, and it just becomes color by numbers after a while. Where like, yeah, I know everybody's character design by heart, so it is a lot quicker to, I don't know. I feel like I
Yeah.
lost I lost the plot here a little
No,
bit.
no, no. That makes sense. Okay, so it's not like too much work, and I guess that would make sense because after like a few, like if you have several pages that are happening in the same location, then you basically have your color palette just like locked in, and you don't have to keep
I
reinventing it every single shot.
I literally have my color palette locked in, like saved for each, like one for each character, and then also for each environment too.
Oh yeah, no, that would speed things up and also make it way more consistent.
Yeah, consistency is the main thing because I fret a lot about that a lot. Um,
Yeah, when it comes to consistency, like how long does these comics take to finish, and is there like what happens when you improve during the process? Like, what's the considerations when it comes to consistency?
um like in terms of the only things I feel like I can keep consistent is like the brushes I'm using, the way I'm designing or laying out the pages, um, and like the color palette. And in terms of like how I draw the characters, I feel like it is inevitable that I will just get better at drawing the characters and like get to know how to draw them as the comic goes on. And that definitely happened with the first comic, uh, where you can, if you compare like the character Elise on like the first and the last few pages, you can see that her ears have just like migrated down the side of her head and gotten a lot longer. Because in my mind, I'm just like, oh, I want her to have longer, cuter ears. And
Yeah, those
just kind of, I
ear
don't know.
design is cute.
Yeah, sorry. All I can really do is like roll with it and just accept it. Like, okay, like it's a little funny. I don't know. I'm not gonna go back and like redraw her ears for every page up until I wised up to how I wanted to draw her.
That's interesting though. So it's like during the process of making the comic and drawing each one of these characters like dozens and dozens of times, like it actually is a process of like fleshing out the character design and kind of figuring them out as you go along.
Yeah, especially as I become more adept with like how to actually put character into the character with the way that I draw or design them. Because I am a student of the world. I'm always learning and picking stuff up, and there's just stuff that I didn't consider when I started each comic. Um, that now I'm like, oh wait, this is better. This feels more them, and I don't know. There's not too much going on in the current comic that is like completely different, but the one thing that's I think has changed the most is probably Baruka's hair.
Oh, did it change? I didn't even notice.
Yeah, like her bangs get a lot more blunt. It's been simplified now to like a straight line across her head with like a couple notches. And then her like the back of her hair has gotten a lot more like layered and blown out. I don't know.
Okay.
It's probably one of the, like I can't tell even if it's something only I would notice too, but
Yeah, and
I,
imagine because the thing is like when I was reading anyways your comics, there is kind of like that suspension of disbelief, you know, almost like you just get really into it, and like tiny little things like the character design changing would probably like just go unnoticed ultimately during the read through.
that's kind of what I'm hoping too whenever I'm kind of just embracing that it's an inevitable thing, because it's more often than not probably just something only I would ever notice as the artist. I'm supposed to fret over things like that.
Yeah, it's like the audience are just having it from a completely different perspective, just totally engaged in the comic. Yeah. So I noticed that there's like one little scene where I can't remember which it was. Chloe, I believe, who's like kind of demonstrating her skills on an espresso machine.
Oh yeah.
The moment that I saw that sequence, I was like, Willow must have like a decent amount of experience with the espresso machine, just because of like how it was all sequenced together. It just seemed like, yeah,
yeah. My dark past is that I was a barista. I worked in like craft coffee, like the kind where like the walls are white and it feels like a hospital. um, for a grand total of probably like 8 years, I think, and worked on machines like that, and was even kind of prepping myself to do like competitive barista work, which is like, if you know, like
oh,
YouTube personality James Hoffman, that's kind of what he's
yeah,
known
yeah.
for. Is he does the barista competitions. I think he won one at some point. I don't remember when, but that level of like coffee is what I was doing for a while. So it is just like a mountain of knowledge in my brain that is relatively untouched, so I needed to kind of work that out somewhere.
Yeah, just kind of bring it into the comic. Wow, that's crazy though. So like, did you ever like compete in a barista competition, or was that just?
I did
Uh...
a couple local things, but never on like a professional level because at that point I had become jaded with the industry and had an existential crisis and decided to become an artist. And thank God that worked out.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I think it definitely works out pretty well.
So far, so good.
Uh, so yeah, on the topic of like being like switching to a pro artist, like do
Mm-hmm.
you do conventions or anything beyond just like Patreon and like selling comics or
Yeah, like I've been okay. I mean, obviously, I had to take a few years off from conventions, but I was doing them a lot before the pandemic hit. And then this past FC in January was my first one back, and it was such a welcome experience. And it's something I want to keep repeating. So I should just say, like, yeah, I sell at conventions. I plan on doing that more in the future. I just haven't gotten into any more than FC, so I'll figure that out. But for the most part, it's just Patreon is like my main source of income. And then I got my little store, which I got, you know, comics, the dockies, some little stickers. I have a print shop. And then lately I've been getting more into actually like distributing my comic to local stores and having it sold in a storefront, which has been blowing my mind a little bit that that is
what? Oh my god, that's
actually
so
acceptable.
cool.
Because
What?
well, because I there's a couple local shops who turns out they're fans of my work too, and saw something in my comic more than furry porn, and thought it belonged on the shelf. And I mean, I'm actually running out to do a restock at uh, a shop like 10 minutes away from me tomorrow.
Oh, that's so cool. And these are just like shops that are like just general book and comic stores. They're not like furry themed specifically or anything like that. It's just or
I yeah, like I mean, I'm up in Seattle, and so a lot of the like nerd spaces like comic stores have a lot of overlap with like um wow, why can't I think like the queer community.
yeah.
And also within the queer community there's a huge subset of furries up
Yeah.
here, to the point where I actually just went to this place the other day. We have our own bar. There is a furry owned and operated and themed bar that I
What?
went to. Yeah, it rules. I
Oh
love it
man, I
up
gotta
here.
come down to Seattle.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
um but yeah, that all being said, like um Patreon is definitely the winner. And by that I mean my patrons, who are all sweethearts, and I love them very much for letting me pay rent with art.
Oh, it's always good to have the support with that. So
Mm-hmm.
like for your comics, do you print out so I'd assume it's just crossing that bridge that'd be in print right now or like
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Yeah, just that so far. I'm really crossing my fingers that a show of the ropes can be printed by like at least halfway through the year, but I'm not hitting my mark just because I had to take so much time off for finally getting COVID. So
Oh no.
I it had to happen. But
Oh.
um at least by the end of the year I should also have that one published and ready to go. And that'll I'm really looking forward to that because I can't tell you how like intensely satisfying it was to see my work in print.
Oh, I can only imagine. That would be so cool. Like just looking
Mm-hmm.
back, having it all finished, being able to
Mm-hmm.
flip
And
through
like
an actual book.
reading it front to back after working on pages one at a time is a bit like, oh yeah, I made something. I made a whole book. I made a story. What?
Yeah. It's kind of like with the animation, do a bunch of frames one at a time and then finally play it back. It's like, ooh.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So with that being finished towards the end of the year, do you have like a set schedule or like quota when it comes to finishing pages?
Yeah, like I have to keep it pretty loose because the second I add too much structure into my work schedule, I like just eat myself alive, or it just doesn't work out and then I get all like upset with myself for not meeting my goal or whatever. So I just kind of go just kind of do whatever. But my like minimum that I at least try to hit, which is very doable, is like at least 2 pages a month, but it ends up being closer to 3 or 4.
Oh, okay. It's like that's interesting. I don't know why I had it in my head. I thought for sure you'd have this like set exact amount, like 1 page per week, totally rigid, and just like that's how you get a big comic done.
I mean, no, because I mean, there's weeks like just this last week where I tried to sit down at my computer for work and just like couldn't do it. Um, Nothing was looking right. Nothing was feeling good. I hated the feeling of like being on my computer and just felt allergic to it. So I was like, I guess I can't do a comic page this week. That's okay. And instead, went over to my sketch page and sketched out this like huge, huge scene. And that's what I've been working on instead. It's just like a little basic this huge like concert scene that I've been sinking my brain into for the past week or so, just as like a little break. Because I think I do
Okay.
get I think that is my brain saying like, hey, you're a little burnt out, you got to do something else.
Yeah, switching up a different creative project.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, that's good to know. I was always like worried, like, oh no, the only way you successfully finish a comic is with just like strict deadlines and having exact quotas. So
No,
yeah,
I,
that's
I have
interesting.
a that's this is another shout out to the patrons, but they have always encouraged me to like, yeah, take a break if you don't feel good or you don't feel like drawing, because um if if you don't, the art will you will hurt yourself, and also the art will kind of show it. Which has been my experience, is that if I'm burnt out and really forcing it, then the art just looks also pretty forced, which
Yeah.
isn't what I want.
I mean, I guess that does make sense. That would have to be. I mean, you'd almost have to do that for a like such a marathon project to prevent burnout. You just kind of have to go at your own pace.
It's less of a marathon and more of a nice walk that happens to last 2 to 3 years.
Like that, yeah, just a nice casual stroll.
Yeah. And I know, and it is hard to look at how other people are doing it and see that they are going on a freaking marathon and just like pumping out page after page after page at an impossible rate. But
Yeah, I
that's
saw the like, documentary on like the mangakas and how they do it, and it's like they
oh
get up at
god.
6 a.m. every day and they do 12 hours a day and they don't go outside and they don't exercise and they just have these insane deadlines. Like, oh my god.
Awful. I mean, for a point of comparison, have you ever seen its author Ursula K. Le Guin's schedule for work?
I don't think so, no.
She did the Earthsea books. I want to find this really quick. Uh, 5:30. Wake up and lie there and think. Get breakfast. Get to work writing until noon, and then you read. You listen to music. You do some correspondence, and you make dinner, and that's it. Like, it's so relaxed. Um, and then the best part, after 8 p.m., I tend to be very stupid, and we won't talk about this, which is so relatable. I love her for it.
Yeah, yeah. A few hours that just kind of pass without
Yeah, and like after doing this for this long, I've really tapped into just like, what does my brain want in order for me to like feel good while I also upkeep this as a job. And so I I don't know. I'm treating myself to a little bit, not a luxurious lifestyle, but just trying to actually treat myself well now that I'm kind of like outside of the structures of standard work and can really care for myself in that way
Yeah,
and
I
not
don't.
be a mangaka because they burn out in like 5 years, you know?
Yeah, it's just devastating to their health and just.
Yeah.
No, I think it's definitely that's the way to do it. To just like kind of figure out how your brain and body works and just go at a pace that's sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
It's
so
good for her.
absolutely. Yeah, so I can't remember where I read this. At least I think I did. You said something about uh where your inspiration for the kind of like body types and anatomy came from. I was
Mm-hmm.
wondering if you could like kind of talk about those influences and stuff.
Sure. I mean, like, I think a lot of it has come from like reading a lot of early, well, not early, but like let's say 10 years ago, like furry porn comics. And because I was like very much in the scene and enjoying what I was seeing, but not quite producing or like a part of it as an artist just yet. And reading them and enjoying bits and pieces of like um I don't know. Like I love like Mish. I loved like all like honestly a lot of the hard blush stuff was like awesome
Oh
back
yeah.
then. Cuz it's the closest I could get to trans feminine stuff. But uh what I guess my takeaway from reading those was like, you know, for me personally, there was always this element of like, man, there's something kind of like missing. There's this like missing element of reality that makes this feel like it's a little fantastical or like it exists in this like porn universe, you know, like a porn city where no one wears clothes or whatever, like that's, you know, hot and you can get your
Yeah.
rocks off you can get your rocks off to it, but it's not relatable. It's not something I can like feel that is something I could maybe replicate or do. It just is designed to be pornography. And that has its like purposes for sure and is like awesome in its own right. Um, but when that was all I was reading and I couldn't find anything that was more grounded, I think that was what kind of set me off on like wanting to have characters that feel like people and bodies that don't feel at least not completely idealized. And especially when it comes to um like gender sort of wow. I should know this. I should know this word. Um blanking out so bad.
Oh, that's right.
I don't know, like representation of like different genders, different expressions of gender, and different body types. Like that's something I guess I wanted to bring to the table just because it was something I had always wanted to see in porn that never felt like it was there.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, no,
Mm-hmm.
the anatomy that you bring to the table, it has like this distinctive element. It has that sort of element of realism. Well, I mean, just like in terms of the general body types you don't see a lot in the furry art. It's kind
Mm-hmm.
of like it looks like you've done a lot of life drawing. I'm guessing, like drawing from models and stuff.
I was yeah, I studied it in college a little bit and um like it completely invaluable what I learned and then took a lot of time off from it and honestly for a long time up until about a year and a half ago if I was running into any anatomy trouble I would take an unflattering selfie and figure out look at my own body and kind of be like okay yeah what's going on here and I think that's kind of what led to a lot of my knowledge of anatomy was just looking at my own body a lot. And so, I mean, that's a little revealing, I guess, that like a lot of what people have seen is my own body to some degree, but like, maybe I've cut some of the fat out or added some back on or whatever, changed things here and there.
Yeah,
But
using
actually, in the
pictures as
oh,
a sort of like loose anatomical and sort of pose reference, and then
yeah, because I do find it really useful to like, okay, I have like the vibe of what this pose is, right? But I don't actually know logistically, like, how does that feel? What does it look like? Where does the weight lean, kind of thing? And so then I do it, and I do it in a way that feels natural and relaxed, and take a picture of it and learn a thing or two. And honestly, everyone's got a body, and I think if you can do that, go for it, especially with hands, you know?
oh
Everyone.
yeah, hands are a big
Yeah.
one. Ever
Hmm.
run into trouble? Just shoot a picture of your own hand.
But actually, in the last year, I've started hosting a little like figure drawing get together between friends at my place, and we all just kind of pose for each other and do some studies here and there, and that's also been pretty invaluable, and it's been really nice to get back into it, and also get back into it in a much less studious environment than a university, and now I can drink wine while I do it, so it's awesome.
Oh my, because you host a play like at your place with friends. You do like a life draw. Oh, that's so cool.
Yep, it's it's one of my favorite things going on right now. Like consistently, it's fun.
Yeah. Oh man, that would be a great opportunity for just like practicing, but just kind of hanging out, not in like the totally formal university setting where it's like do a 2 hour pose and then a bunch of quick gestures and
Mm-hmm. Now that I guess the one shortcoming of it is that we don't have professional models, and none of us can pose for longer than like 15 minutes. So we're all just doing our best, but it's getting gestures and learning how to like hit a pose with like, I don't know, like, or like learning something like gleaning like the force method for figure drawing and trying to implement that.
what is the force method exactly?
Oh gosh, I couldn't describe it. It's like a YouTube video I watched once, but um, maybe I can. Well,
Oh well, no, that's
if
all right. I was just really curious.
if you search YouTube the force method, there is a figure drawing looking video, and I would recommend watching it because it just like it put a it put a new idea in my brain for how to approach it, and it's been fun to experiment and branch out from my usual little process.
Okay, right on. So you mentioned that you studied like you did figure drawing in college. Like, were you studying like specifically something in the arts or?
Tangentially, I actually majored in art history and got my degree in it. I was
Oh,
art history, Western civilization, and music technology is what I got my degree in. Um, but for whatever reason, the program that I went to, they had you actually take art and like art foundations courses as a part of the art history program. So I had the opportunity to do like a couple things, but I didn't go to art school or anything because that was too freaking expensive. And at the time, I thought I can't make a living as an artist.
yeah. Be too ambitious at the time. Be like, oh, I don't know. Pay off all
Yeah,
these crazy tuitions.
and look at me now. I'm really putting that degree to good work, and I am still paying off my college debt.
Oh,
Oh well, sure.
so with crossing that bridge, it seemed like it kind of came across like it came out of you said initial pinup, and then like as you're developing the lore, it kind of like kind of merged into a comic.
Mm-hmm.
So for a show of ropes, was there like what was the origin of that? Because I'd imagine like it's a really big commitment to like go for a comic that's going to be 70 plus pages and take years to complete. Like how does how did you come up with that idea, and like what's your process for sort of deciding on major comic ideas like this going forward?
So a show of the ropes was less like, oh, I have this moment that I want. There were a couple, but they're not as like major as crossing that bridge. But mostly there were like ideas or intentions that I set out with. One of which was I had my characters Red and Baruka pretty well established at this point and wanted to kind of flesh them out and give them a life and have us have a view into that. Um, and then I also wanted rope and rope play and rope bondage shibari to be the sort of central kink because that's a big one for me. And it's something I feel I know at least enough about to write a story about it or featuring it. And then what else? Oh, um a self-indulgent moment with coffee, which I got and I love it. And then more like abstractly, there was this theme of like I guess I don't know if I would call it like a warning, maybe just developing or thinking about the idea of like parasocial relationships online
Oh yeah.
and sort of like the idealization of this like very manicured or romanticized idea of sex that you see online, which I talked about earlier with like early comic stuff, and having your sexual identity and your expectations for sex form around that, and wanting to kind of encourage Chloe, who is kind of like, I guess, the audience and also a little bit of me, etc., to in like peel away from those expectations and find something like real for herself. And that was something that I thought or I found to be very important then and now, and was kind of one of the central goals for like how the story unfolded.
Okay, because yeah, the whole beginning of the comic is like just setting that up, and then you have that
Mhm.
scene where I just love it at the coffee shop. It's like, oh shit, he recognizes Red. just and then
Just
just
like
like
a
the roller coaster of emotions. I just love how that whole sequence played out.
thank you. I gotta can I give a shout out to an anime called Nichijou that's like the just the forerunner for like my entire sense of humor and like comedic timing. That shit is so good. Everyone needs to watch it.
Yeah, I'll have to check it out.
Yeah. Um yeah, I don't know. I don't have much I don't nothing else to say there. Just that after once I've established those and kind of figured out what the structure of everything was, it followed sort of the same steps as crossing that bridge where it just kind of fleshed itself out.
Okay, well that's interesting. Like exploring that idea of parasocial relationships, and then just having that thing that a lot of people don't have, where it's like, oh, you actually meet these people just unexpectedly in real life, and suddenly they're like just normal people going about their lives, doing stuff at the coffee shop.
Which I hope like I hope the takeaway isn't like just wait for the miracle to fall into your lap, but more like no it embrace that maybe this comic too is a work that is romanticizing or idealizing or maybe even or just like condensing the experience and uh seek something out for yourself that is fulfilling for yourself. And if I don't know, and this whole overarching theme that seems to tie my work together of just like self-actualizing and growing as a person with sex and kink.
Yeah, that is
Because that's my whole life. Yeah.
So another somewhat autobiographical one.
I
Right.
mean, it always is a bit.
Yeah, I find those are oftentimes some of the best comics where it's just the author putting some of their own experiences and personal development kind of mirroring the characters in a way. It really just kind
I
of brings them to
completely
life.
agree. Yes.
So yeah, those two comics, they share sort of like a shared setting, I guess. Like there's a little bit of overlap. It's kind of
Yeah, yeah. There's I mean, it's funny because in Crossing That Bridge, it's name dropped once as Willow Valley, which was funny because I hadn't started going by Willow when I came up with that.
you get a town named after yourself. It's great.
So now I have to just say, like, it looks super self-indulgent. It's not. I just thought, hey, that sounds kind of nice. Yeah, it's just like a sort of made up town that's vaguely Pacific Northwestern, very queer, and is just kind of the hub for all of my little OCs and their happenings.
Okay. Yeah, that actually like brings me to one thing that I noticed when I was reading the comic. It's just like a brief aside, like just like all of the environments. You keep the backgrounds pretty simple, but they're all just like so cozy. They're all places you just like to chill out.
Yay! I love to hear that. I mean, um, especially with Crossing That Bridge, like backgrounds were not my strong suit when I made that one, and I wouldn't even call them my strong suit now. They're something I'm always working on and like establishing an environment. But with the cafe, I did put a little bit of thought into like, man, okay, with my cafe experience and my sensibilities, if I could make a cafe out of nothing, what would it look like? And there it is.
Hell, idealized cafe.
Uh-huh. And we would have a Sinesso MVP Hydra for the espresso machine.
Oh, is that you got you the dream espresso machine?
Oh, with the powder, with like the seafoam green powder coat. Oh yeah, that's great.
Well, I think that was about everything that I can think of at the moment, to be honest. But yeah,
Yeah,
it was really great having you. Thank you so much for being on.
awesome. Yeah, thank you for letting me just kind of yak about the process. I hope I said something enlightening for someone. I don't know.
No, absolutely, absolutely. Like for me, it was there's a few surprises, a few things I wasn't expecting, especially when it came to like the time management thing. I almost felt like, oh, it's just gonna be this like super rigid self-discipline thing, which I've never personally been able to do, and I've never like it's never made sense. So it's good to
I will
know
say,
on a
like,
level. Like,
trying to hone in discipline is always something I'm trying at any given moment, but also not beating myself up for if I can't. Because I think without any discipline, I wouldn't be able to do any work at all. So just maintaining a level that doesn't burn me out, basically. Yeah.
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 Oh, right on.
Well, awesome. um, well, shoot. Maybe should I drop my socials?
Absolutely, I will link those in the description.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Sheesh. I guess
Thanks
that's
for
all.
being. Yeah, thanks for being on.